hope came in a new group. New converts to Islam, the Turks or the Seljuks. Those were new people that were from the people of the Sunnah. Yes, they're very militant, they have little knowledge, but they were still fighting in the way of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, fighting against non-Muslims still. When they saw what happened in Baghdad, they were not happy. So they came, and they were strong in the military sense. They came, overpowered al-Basasiri, took Baghdad back, they got the Khalifa, they placed him back. But then, although now they acknowledged him as the Khalifa, but the real authority was with them. So the Khalifa, if you will, is a puppet, is just a figure, but the true power is in their hands. And now you have the Salajiqa, the new group of Muslims centered in Baghdad of Sunni belief versus the Ismailis centered in Cairo. And you can imagine, of course, there will be battles between both, but the true hope, I think, is the one of the greatest figures that appeared at the time, a figure called Nizam al-Mulk. Nizam al-Mulk was not a ruler, he was the wazir, the minister. So Nizam al-Mulk started realizing that it is not about military victory, it is not about fighting the Ismailis. He noticed that the fight is in ideologies. That how come the Ismaili madhab is spreading, that schools are shutting down, that people are so away from ilm, knowledge. And he realized this. The first step is knowledge. The Ismailis have to be confronted on the area of ideologies. He noticed this. Not only that, he noticed that the Ismailis were using philosophy. Another group that appeared at this time, philosophers. And they used philosophy in a way that was very deviant. And they approached theology with a philosophical understanding. And the scholars of the time were confused, fighting among each other. And he noticed that this is the real threat. So he started a wide movement of building schools. Let me speak a little bit about Nizam al-Mulk. Al-Imam al-Dhahabi, the famous Imam in Siyar A'lam al-Nubala, in his biographies, critical biographies, as he describes Nizam al-Mulk, he describes him as a very pious person. Nizam al-Mulk, this wazir, used to fast every Monday and Thursday. Who among us is fasting Mondays and Thursdays nowadays? Nizam al-Mulk used to fast every Mondays and Thursdays. Not only that, every day he would give 100 dinars in the form of charity. Nizam al-Mulk, as described by Imam al-Dhahabi, he says he was of scholarship, dayyinan, he loved religion, very generous, adil, very just, halim, very forbearing, kathir al-safh, he often forgives and pardons on those who errs against him. Not only that, tawil al-samt, often silent in dhikr and fikr. Not only that, he describes him, he's surrounded by scholars. He started gathering scholars around him. When one told him, some of the people told him, those scholars around you, they're preoccupying you, they're distracting you from all the matters. He's the wazir, the grand wazir. So he looked at them. He told them the following: those are the beauty of this life and the hereafter. If I was to carry them on the top of my head, that wouldn't even suffice them. He was so pleased to have scholars around him. He started spreading hadith. He noticed that bid'ah and innovations are spreading. So he loved hadith. And he said once, I'm not of the people, I'm not a scholar of hadith, but I love to be one that contributes to the caravan that transfers the word of the Prophet, peace be upon him. He used to do one amazing thing. Whenever he would hear the adhan, he would stop. Who among us nowadays? That's a lesson. We will be working and it's time for salah. When you hear the adhan, later, after I finish watching, after Nizam al-Mulk, the ruler, if the adhan is heard, he stops. Silence. And then once the adhan is over, he goes and he prays. He loved to pray. He always prayed on time. But not only that, he would never sit except in the state of wudu. If he nullifies his wudu, he will go renew his wudu. And after he renews the wudu, he prays 2 rak'ahs, which is a sunnah, by the way, a sunnah that many of us neglect. But that tells you about the inner state of Nizam al-Mulk. Nizam al-Mulk then realized that, as I said, the ilm is the most important thing. It is the first step, and this is a very important lesson. To get out from the situation we're in, the first step is ilm. Ilm is empowering. Nizam al-Mulk started spreading schools, building schools. Those schools were called al-Madaris al-Nizamiyya, the Nizamiyya schools, and Nizamiyya is after his name. And he built a huge school in Baghdad, one in Naysapur, all over his territory. He started building schools, encouraging scholars to come, started surrounding himself with scholars, paying for them. And as such, a large number of scholars started amassing in those schools. And he directed them to face the challenge of the philosophy, the challenge of the Ismaili sect. Now, the reason I'm saying this, that is the seed. It is those schools that we will see later generated the generation of Salah Ad-Din al-Ayyubi. It is this seed placed by Nizam al-Mulk, maybe 100 years before the appearance of Salah Ad-Din himself, that will lead eventually to the revival of the Ummah, as we will see as we hear. So he started spreading ilm and knowledge, as I said. Now, Al-Nizamiyya, the biggest school, was the one in Baghdad. One of the scholars there, and I would like to mention that, one of the scholars was Al-Imam al-Juwayni. And Al-Imam al-Juwayni, the reason I'm mentioning that, this great scholar, one of his students is the very famous Hujjat al-Islam, Al-Imam al-Ghazali. Al-Imam al-Ghazali appeared at this time. And it is so important to know the situation in which Imam al-Ghazali appeared and the challenges he faced, so one can understand the benefits of Imam al-Ghazali and his contributions to this ummah. Let's give a description of Imam al-Ghazali quickly. And I'll just say a brief sentences that Imam al-Dhahabi, the great Hanbali scholar, the great student of Ibn Taymiyyah, described Imam al-Ghazali with. When he describes Imam al-Ghazali, he starts saying, Al-Shaykh, Al-Imam, Al-Bahr, حجة الإسلام عجوبة الزمان صاحب التصانيف والذكاء المفرط, which translate as the great Sheikh, the great Imam. Al-Bahr means the ocean, the sea of knowledge. حجة الإسلام, the evidence for Islam. أعجوبة الزمان, the wonder of his time. صاحب التصانيف, the one that wrote so many things. And then he describes his dhaka, his IQ, his intelligence, the one with great intelligence. And then he says, Al-Ghazali Imamun Kabir, that surely Al-Ghazali is a great Imam. And then he tells us, because many people actually go to extremes when it goes to Imam al-Ghazali, and he says, and it is not a condition for a great scholar that he does not slip sometimes. And then when he describes him later, he says, فَرَحِمَ اللَّهُ الْإِمَامِ أَبَا حَامِدٍ, may Allah have mercy on Imam Abu Hamid al-Ghazali. Where is the likes of him, whether in his sciences or virtues? And then he also mentions, nevertheless, we never claim that he is infallible or never makes. The time that Imam al-Ghazali appeared in, you can see the confusion in the Ummah from an ideological perspective, and I would like to speak a little bit, maybe in 2 minutes, about that, because it was a main threat. You had the Ismailis, a major sect that was threatening the essence of Tawheed in this Ummah. And you had the philosophers from an intellectual perspective that were challenging and using logic and philosophy to challenge basic beliefs. And they used philosophy, as I said, to enter into the realm of theology and the unseen, describing Allah and things that one should not use his logic to enter in. But their arguments were so strong and people could not stand against them. And that was from the scholarly circle perspective. As for people, they were so much confused, so much far from the deen, so much entrenched in the life of this world. As Ibn al-Jubayr describes them, the state of the people of the time, he would say that surely they were like Jahiliyyah, like the day of ignorance. All their concern is their shahawat, their desires, and their stomach. And even he goes further and says, let anybody be assured that those eastern districts, the areas of Sham, Egypt, all these areas, there is no Islam left at all in this area. It is full of bid'ah, innovations, shahawat, desire. Very few remain on the true belief. Versus the western side, and he speaks of Andalusia at this time, and Morocco and Mauritania, where they are on a clear path for Sunnah. And that tells you the state of the people that Imam al-Ghazali appeared in. You might ask, where were the scholars of the time? What were they doing? And again, if you start reading the books, like Ibn al-Athir and his famous book describing the history of this period of time, and Ibn al-Kathir as well, as we said, both of them, you'll find scholars fighting among each other. And they're fighting over issues that I would say completely irrelevant. So the major two groups at the time was, one, Al-Hanabila, the followers of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. They viewed themselves as they are the people of Sunnah. They're the people that are guarding the Sunnah, the followers of Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal. And how much Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal stood for the right cause, which is all right things. But because of that, they viewed themselves as the only people that are on the Sunnah. They started attacking the other group at this time, which was the Shafi'iyya. It is okay to differ between scholars, but the difference between them went to a degree that the two schools used to fight to an extent that they would call each other names and things like that. So for example, one of them from the Shafi'i madhab would say if anybody lost a donkey, let him enter the district of Al-Azaj and pick anybody. Why? Because those are the people that follow Imam Ahmad bin Hanbal. Worse than that. One of them would say, and he's describing the very famous verse, ما كفر سليمان ولكن الشياطين كفروا. The verse that says, surely Sulaiman did not commit any act of kufr, but the shayateen, the devils around him, they are the kuffar. And he would say, explaining this, indeed, Sulaiman did not commit kufr, but it was the shayateen that committed kufr. And then he would add, similarly, Imam Ahmad ibn Hanbal is not a kafir, but his followers are kuffar. Astaghfirullah. One of them would say, if the matter is in my hands, I would take from the people following Imam al-Shafi'i, I would take from them jizya. They're non-Muslims. And you can tell, oftentimes fights would happen and irat between the two schools. So Imam al-Ghazali appeared at a time, as you can see, where challenges of philosophy, challenges of Ismaili madhab were not being met. The scholars of Sunnah were busy fighting among each other, and nobody was addressing the main issues. Imam al-Ghazali appeared at this time, and Imam al-Ghazali, he had a sincere desire for truth. Where is truth? There is confusion. And then he started studying philosophy first. And he studied philosophy, and then he came up with a book called The Intent of the Philosophers. And people thought, oh, Imam al-Ghazali is a great philosopher. And of course, people studying philosophy loved this. But then Imam al-Ghazali wrote another book. And this book called The Incoherence of the Philosophers. One of the major contributions of Imam al-Ghazali at this time, he wrote this book is considered a landmark. It was the book that confronted the ideology of philosophy at this time. So Imam al-Ghazali had this contribution against the philosophers, but also Imam al-Ghazali wrote another famous book that he addressed the issue of the Ismaili ideology. The book is called Al-Mustadhiri, or Fada'ih al-Batiniyya, the scandals of the Batini movement, the people of the Batiniyya, as we said, hidden meanings. And in this book, he clearly demonstrates the deviant nature of this sect. Makes it very clear to everyone in a clear way how deviant this sect is. And as such, Imam al-Ghazali, on the intellectual plane, had a major contribution in, if you will, destroying two challenges that were challenging the Ummah at this time in the terms of the creed, the philosophers and the Ismaili madhab. And he went on and he continued to study various things, ilm al-kalam, science of dialects and differing and how to argue. He wanted the truth. And as such, his IQ was so high, he was so powerful in making arguments that to the extent that whenever he would argue with anyone, people would be amazed at his IQ and how he's articulate and as such, his scholarship and his knowledge of fiqh, he now becomes the head of al-Madrasa al-Nizamiyya at Baghdad, the top position. And I want you to imagine this. Now Imam al-Ghazali is at the top position available at the time, the top school, top position. Everyone around him is praising, you're the mind, you're the man. And so students are studying under him, and he's praised by everyone. But nevertheless, and this is again the sincerity of Imam al-Ghazali, he realizes that he needs to save his own self, that he's speaking about things while his heart, he sees that his heart is sick, that he needs to purify himself, that many of the things, many of the diseases of the heart, from love of status, love of wealth, greed, kibr, arrogance, self-admiration, being opinionated, he sees that he's going to be destroyed himself, and that time is limited, time is running, and that he needs to find the truth. He needs to act on what he's learning. He needs to step back and purify everything, turn back and find out what's true and what's untrue. And to do that, he decides finally he's not going to teach in al-Madrasa al-Nizamiyya. He retreats, he pulls back, and everyone comes to him, you can't, you're the imam, you're the one leading this effort. But he decides that actually no, he can't stay because it's harmful for him. And he leaves, and nobody knows where he went. And it said he went in Sham. And some say that he worked as a janitor in the different masajid. Can you imagine Imam al-Ghazali sitting in a masjid and people are teaching his stuff and he's just the janitor in the masjid. And he worked on mujahadat al-nafs, purifying himself, treating his own ailments, implementing what the Prophet said, checking everything he got, is it from the Sunnah or not. And then finally, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, when he long years of mujahada and struggle against his own self, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala returns him back. Imam al-Ghazali emerges a completely different figure. And many scholars describe that he has changed from inside. And not only that, now he came out with his book, the very famous book, إحياء علوم الدين. And in this book, Imam al-Ghazali puts the outward knowledge of fiqh with the inward knowledge of tazkiyat al-nafs and curing the heart. A work that's, yes, many people will tell you there is some problems with it, but it is one of its kind. It was an attempt that inspired scholars later to even go and base different works on that, and it led to a new view, if you will, which he emphasized. When he returned, he started not only teaching people intellectually, but focusing on mujahada, focusing on purifying oneself, focusing on curing the heart, combined with following the sunnah. He continuously checked and changed his words. He criticized whenever if he did something, said something wrong, he would criticize it and renew his positions. And I think that has to do with why sometimes people get confused when you speak about Imam al-Ghazali. No doubt, he's a great figure. Imam al-Ghazali, students would later go based on his work and will spread this mujahada concept through the ummah. Scholars that came later even, like Ibn al-Jawzi, which we will see, that lived actually in the time of Nur al-Din Zinki and Salah Ad-Din. He took the work of Imam al-Ghazali, like Ihya Ulum al-Din, noticed some, if you will, from a scholarly perspective, that there are improvements. And that's when he wrote his book, Minhaj al-Qasidin, a book that many of us would read up till today, diagnosing the real disease of the ummah. Al-Ghazali lived in the time of the Crusades. And I'll ask you a question. Imam al-Ghazali, Imam Ibn al-Jawzi, those scholars we're going to speak about, Sheikh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, did they speak about the Crusades? They lived in the time of the Crusades. What did Imam al-Ghazali and Ibn al-Jawzi focus on? They noticed that the real disease of the ummah is that the ummah is internally dead. There is no point in asking a dead person to stand up and make jihad. He's already dead. So they focused on curing the real diseases of the ummah. حب الدنيا وكراهية الموت, like what the Prophet told us. The disease of the time, love of this world, and hating to die. That's what they focused on.